Alrighty, folks, bring yourselves to order, please. Welcome to the final session of SkeptiCamp. I'm Eggman, or Brian. I know I'm the only one wearing a red shirt. I know we had a talk about Star Trek. I might die between now and the end of the hour, okay? We don't know how it's going to happen. I've already stabbed myself with a badge. I've already broken a vase, and my middle-aged bladder is fit to bursting because I've been hammering the coffee and I've just poured a beer. So let's see how that goes. Final chapter here, we've got Trump, incest, cats, and placebo, and there's commas between those, all right? Okay? Did we put Trump and incest right in? That was pure coincidence, okay? But can we please, folks, have a round of applause for the hosts of the Fallacious Trump podcast, Jim Cliff and Mark Levermore.
Hi there, we're Jim and Mark.
Hello.
And yes, we do host the Fallacious Trump podcast where we talk about logical fallacies.
And the logical fallacy, as you all know, is an error in reasoning that leads to bad or invalid arguments. Of course, you all know that because you're a skeptical audience, so you know the big hits like the Strawman and the 1 True Scotsman and
the wrong tool fallacy, ignoring linear time.
What?
The wrong tool fallacy.
The fuck are you talking about?
The ones we made up.
Oh, the ones we identified.
The ones we identified and then made up names for.
Yeah, fair enough. And we've been following Trump now for about 4 years. So we've discovered many ways, amazing ways that he gets things wrong. And some of those ways we've identified as new fallacies. So we're going to share some of those with you tonight. Yeah,
and we are allowed to make up names for fallacies. That's okay. Anyone can do it.
We're professionals.
Well, that's not why we're allowed to do it. Okay. You can do it if you want. If you find a new fallacy, basically, it's something that people have been doing for a while. Aristotle came up with lots and named them, and ever since then, students of logic and critical thinking have been coming up with names for new things that they've identified as bad arguments. And so, we're going to talk about some of the ones that we've identified during our 4 years of doing this. And the first one we want to talk about is called the wrong tool fallacy. That's what we called it anyway. And this is not just this guy being a wrong tool, but it is when someone makes a claim and then they present evidence in a form that is not the right kind of evidence that would measure that claim. So our first example it's kind of Trump adjacent, comes from Jared Kushner on Fox, and he's talking here about his Middle Eastern peace plan and why it's going to succeed where others have failed.
If you look at the original proposal, the Arab Peace Initiative, that was an 8-line proposal. It was a good faith proposal. Past proposals have been 2 to 3 pages. This is an over 80-page proposal with a map, never been done before.
So there's probably a lot that factors in to international diplomacy among ideologically and religiously opposed groups, but page count.
Yeah.
Probably not one of the big things.
And a map.
With whether or not there's a map. Yeah, the map's immaterial.
Right.
Sometimes this is also used by creationists, as in this example from the Creationist Ministries.
How would our view of dinosaurs change if scientists found carbon-14 in their bones? Well, a group of geophysicists claim to have discovered exactly that, carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. These results seriously undermine the evolutionary story of long ages of Earth history. However, they fit nicely with biblical history, whereby dinosaurs lived only thousands of years ago, with their fossils forming from animals buried during Noah's flood.
So the claim that's being made here is that carbon-14 decays so quickly that you wouldn't expect to find any traces of it when you carbon date dinosaur bones, if they are in fact as old as scientists say they are. There's hundreds of people this weekend, probably thousands, who can explain to you better than I can why that's bullshit. But suffice it to say that real geophysicists know that basically carbon dating isn't useful for anything over about 50,000 years old, because the kind of contamination that you get inevitably when you do the carbon dating process will give you anomalous results like this one.
So our next fallacy we're going to look at, we've called conflating views. And this is basically when an individual will take the views of one member of a group or random multiple groups and say that those views are also held by the rest of the group, and therefore you can hold them in as much disdain as you wish. And who better to illustrate this than our last ousted and outlasted by a lettuce leader, Liz Truss.
I will not allow the anti-growth coalition to hold us back. Labour, the Lib Dems, the SNP, the militant unions, the vested interests dressed up as think tanks, the talking heads, the Brexit deniers, Extinction Rebellion, and some of the people we had in the hall earlier. They prefer protesting to doing, talking on Twitter to taking tough decisions. They peddle the same old answers.
So the claim here, I think there's a claim, the claim is that this vastly disparate group that goes, across the political spectrum from the Lib Dems to XR, and takes in David Byrne's old band and members of Greenpeace who came into the room as well, that they are all they're not doers, none of them, and they're peddlers of the same old nonsense. So yeah, difficult to kind of see where you would fit in the nuanced arguments, Liz. I don't want to get all a bit nuancy, but the kind of militantly somewhat held environmental ideals of Greenpeace are not exactly aligned with Nicola's attempt to run an entire devolved country, basically. So to add to the problem, we've got our ex-home and then ex-home and then not ex-home, Cruella Braverman, who adds to the list.
It's the Labour Party, it's the Lib Dems, it's the Coalition of Chaos, it's the Guardian reading, tofu eating, wokerati, dare I say, the anti-growth coalition.
So she's added to the list in a very specific way. It doesn't include meat-eating independent wokerati, but you can see the problem. So the issue is, what they're saying is, there's a big, broad church of people, that one of whom you might identify as a baddie, so therefore you can make all the rest of it, you can tar them with the same baddie brush. Now, this isn't a modern phenomena. I think we've identified one from the 1939 film Gone with the Wind, where this happens.
Scarlett, you're doing business with the same people who robbed us and tortured us and left us to starve. All that's past, Nellie. And I intend to make the best of things, even if they are Yankee things.
So this is fundamentally Mary expressing her disappointment, misgivings with Scarlett setting up and doing business with the very people that have spent the first 2 hours of the film being beastly to them. And basically she's saying those people are the same as the businessmen that Scarlett is now doing, just because they come from the north of the country, which is probably not true. Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, so the final fallacy we want to talk about is called ignoring linear time. And this is where someone basically thinks that if something was possible, it must have already happened. Or if something could happen, then it should have already happened. And that's not how time works. Because there's always, pretty much for everything that's ever happened, a time when it could have happened but hadn't yet happened. So our first example comes from Trump, and this is when he's explaining why Hillary would not be able to beat ISIS if she became president.
If she could have stopped them, she would have done it already. I'll stop them, folks. I'll stop them. Believe me.
And that's basically like stopping a boxing match after round one and going, well, if either of them could have won, they would have already won. So you'll see this kind of exact phrasing everywhere when you start looking for it. Here's another example from the TV show The Rookie.
Don't worry, I'm giving you exactly what you want. I'm leaving.
If you were leaving, you'd already be gone.
But our final example is a little bit of a variation on this, but still manages to ignore the linearity of time, and it's from the film The King of Staten Island.
You went to the person that hates me the most to get the worst review you could possibly get. Why didn't you come down here and ask these guys what they thought of me? Did you ever think of doing that?
I'm sorry. You're right. You're right.
You're not sorry, or you wouldn't have done it.
So the claim that's being made here is that Pete Davidson's character is not sorry, and the evidence being presented is he did the thing he's claiming to be sorry for. Yeah. So this character is missing the fact that that has to come first. It's quite difficult to be sorry about a thing you haven't yet done.
Unless, of course, you're a politician.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And basically, this logic means that you would never be able to be truly sorry about anything, because
like
you
a politician
have to have done it. Fair point. Yeah. So if you've seen Trump or anyone saying something stupid and think it might be a new fallacy and you would like to name it, then you probably can. And if you'd like to check with us if it's on our list, you can get hold of us through these. Yep. And now I suppose we need to kind of do a thematic wrap-up to tie up this whole thing.
Yeah. Are there any fallacies to do with, like, not being able to do endings properly, like the ineffectual farewell fallacy, or the continuing awkward termination appeal?
Yeah. My comedy brain likes it, but my logic brain says, well, how is it a fallacy? What claim are we making? So, and in this group especially, the logic brain won't let the comedy brain do what it wants.
Right.
So, no.
Well, that's the ending right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
thanks.
So.
Okay, nice one. For those of you wondering, yes, we cannot afford 3 microphones. Okay, so let's get straight into the questions then. From Aaron to start with, given how fallacy terms get thrown around on the internet, do you wish Aristotle had not started us down this slippery slope?
Yeah, good question. If he hadn't, though, we probably wouldn't have a podcast, so no.
Yeah, because there's not enough podcasts out there. Thank God for that. Okay. Okay, surely, from Bremner, the perennial smart arse, surely ignoring linear time was the first fallacy you mentioned, question mark.
Very good point. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Next up from Mark, I like the sound of the wokarati. Can someone teach me the secret handshake?
Yeah. I do, yeah. I know that, but it's secret. So obviously, it's a bit like the invisible watermark. It's there, but nobody knows. Yeah. So
I'll show you in the bar later.
I'll show you in the bar later, and then of course I'll have to kill you. But yeah, but you knew that already.
Interestingly, wokarati is also the tagline for Cobra Kai. Okay. Thank you for the 3 people that laughed at. Well done. Okay. From Igor, do you usually start with finding fallacy in the wild and then making name for it? Or do you start with some faulty reasoning and go look for examples of it?
It happens either way, actually. The fallacy in the wild is what we call the ones from kind of film and TV shows. And sometimes I'll just be watching something and think, oh, that's not right. And then we'll do an episode about it. But I've also got a list of fallacies that we want to talk about, and I'll go and find an example.
Okay, fallacy hunting 101. Okay, folks, give it up for Jim and Mark.